Muted.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the Praxair New Helium Applications Innovation Contest. My name is Jonathan Yakasha from NineSigma, and I will be your host and moderator for this webinar. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be transcribed for viewing on the Praxair page on NineSites. At this time, I'll briefly go through the agenda for today's webinar. First, I will provide the speaker introductions and an overview of the challenge. After that, our panelists will present the details of the innovation contest along with some frequently asked questions. Lastly, we'll go through a live question and answer session with questions submitted by today's attendees. To participate in the live question and answer session, please submit your questions at any time through the live Q&A chat box. We will collect and present these questions during our session today. If we're unable to answer your question live, we will be transcribing and answering all questions asked during today's session and posting them on the Praxair forum for viewing at a later date. We'll wrap up today's webinar with information on what you can do for the Praxair New Helium Applications Innovation Contest, including where to register, how to stay connected, and, most importantly, how to submit your proposal. Now, I'm pleased to welcome the following panelists to our webinar this morning. From Praxair, we have Dante Bonnequist, Senior Corporate Fellow, and we also have Michael Dre, Technology Director for Helium. And from NineSigma, we have Eloise Young, PhD, Senior Program Manager. Now I'd like to give a brief overview of the Praxair Innovation Contest. NineSigma's client, Praxair, is seeking to expand the global helium market by identifying novel ways of using helium. This could be achieved by generating value in new or existing processes, creating improvements in efficiency or throughput, or by reducing the environmental impact of a process that utilizes helium. And now, Eloise Young from NineSigma will share with us the technical aims of this contest. Eloise?
Thanks, Jonathan. So the overall objective of this contest is to increase the global market for helium by developing new and interesting applications for its use. So the most compelling proposals that are submitted to this contest will somehow take advantage of the unique properties and characteristics of helium, and they'll use them to either make a process more efficient or more effective, or to use the unusual properties to create products or create effects that couldn't be done in any other way. So the technology is important, but obviously the business opportunity has to be there as well. So really strong proposals will also be able to make a clear case for the business opportunity that you can get from the proposed technology.
Great. Thank you for that summary, Eloise. And now we'll turn to our panelists from Praxair, Dante Bonnequist and Michael Dre, who will tell us more about helium and how it's brought to market. And we'll begin with Michael.
Thanks, Jonathan, and thanks to everybody else on this call. We appreciate your time to listen through some of this. The first slide here is a rundown of helium properties. And generally, when a lot of people think of helium, they think of balloons, party balloons, maybe the Goodyear blimp, something that floats. And while that certainly is a key application for helium, there are a variety of other unique properties that helium possesses that enable all kinds of different applications, manufacturing and all across the map. So I'm going to go through some of the unique properties over on the left side here. The first one is it has the lowest boiling point of any element. So this is key for a lot of different applications, particularly in superconductivity. If you think of MRI machines or the Large Hadron Collider, various physics applications, the temperature at which helium boils is very critical for those applications and is a key driver. Helium is inert, and this is very important for helium. Hydrogen could be a very good substitute for a lot of applications for helium. It's got that pesky flammability and reactivity, and so the fact that helium is inert allows it to be used safely and efficiently in a variety of different places. Low density is obviously critical for lift. If you look at balloons, if you look at any kind of airships, the driver for it. Low viscosity is key in a couple of different applications. High thermal conductivity is very important. If you are looking at an application where you need heat exchange, a direct contact gas heat exchange, helium is very good. It has a very high conductivity, a very good ability to draw off heat, and is inert. So again, it's not reacting with what it's touching. Low atomic mass, small atomic radius, high diffusion rate. Effectively what those mean is helium is able to get through very, very small spaces, or you can push a lot of helium out of a very small space very quickly, and that has a couple of different key applications that have been growing lately. It's a very high speed of sound through helium. It has a very high ionization energy. It's very tough to draw that electron off of helium. And low solubility is important in a variety of different manufacturing applications, as well as in the human body. So again, balloons might be kind of the first thing that pops into people's mind, but there's a lot of different applications for helium, and Dante is going to go into a little bit more detail on some of those.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So the panel that you're looking at now surveys some of the current commercial applications for helium. And I think as we've looked at these, and it might be helpful for you to think in these terms as you're developing your thoughts around new applications. Successful applications often take advantage of two or more of the properties of helium that Mike just discussed. And more often than not, inertness is one of those, and then one of the other properties is also leveraged in the application. So, for example, in the electronics market, in manufacturing various electronics components and materials, the applications generally take advantage of inertness and the high thermal conductivity of helium. In the aerospace applications, it's inertness plus the low atomic weight. In the case of diving and welding, it's inertness combined with low solubility. So as you think through the possible applications for helium, I think a pattern has emerged, at least as far as we're concerned, where the successful applications seem to take advantage of at least two of the properties of helium. Now I'm going to turn it back to Mike, and he's going to describe the means of supplying helium from its source to the customer use point.
This next slide just shows a real quick background on the supply chain for helium, starting from its original source through the end users. Helium is created from the radioactive decay of uranium and thorium deep below the Earth's surface. And a lot of that helium, as we'd alluded to earlier, can escape through various crevices, tiny cracks in the ground, and goes up into the atmosphere and ultimately escapes. But some of it is trapped beneath impermeable cap rock that holds natural gas. And so the helium gets mixed in these natural gas reservoirs and can be present in very, very small quantities up to percent levels. And depending upon what other use there is for the natural gas and how high the helium concentration is, a significant portion of it can be separated in natural gas processing. So if you have just even a couple hundredths of a percent, as in Qatar, it may make sense to, and you're liquefying the natural gas, it may make sense to grab the helium. Otherwise, you may have to have a higher concentration in those natural gas reservoirs to process it. So your basic natural gas processing, the helium is sometimes a co-product, often a byproduct where the natural gas project was already going forward first, and the crude helium is separated from that. There's generally a scope break there. The crude helium goes to a helium purification facility that purifies it up to industrial grade purity, takes out almost all of the contaminants. Some of that gas can be transported in high-pressure gas tube trailers over a relatively long distance to end-use customers that need a significant amount of helium, but not a tremendous amount of helium. And it can also be supplied to different transfill locations where they can take those high-pressure gas tube trailers and put that gas into small cylinders for welding applications or to balloons. The other way that a lot of helium is transported is through these liquid ISO containers, and these containers hold a very significant amount of helium for a reasonable length of time to transport over long distances, particularly if you're sending this helium international. The helium source locations where there is enough helium to justify processing are often in remote areas, and so getting the helium to end users can be a complex process. And as the helium sources and helium processing facilities are in different areas of the world, it becomes more and more complex. So this becomes a very key, this distribution becomes a very key part of the process. So these liquid tanks are brought to different transfills around the world, and they separate the liquid into dewars. Sometimes it's put into cylinders, and those are transported to end users, whether they're, again, welding or physics laboratories or a whole host of other applications. And with that, I will turn it back over to Dante.
So recycle of helium is part of the responsible use of the resource. And helium is actually quite easy to reprocess, again, because it's inert, it doesn't react with anything. The nature of the helium itself is not changed in the application that utilizes helium. And additionally, some of the other properties that were mentioned previously make it very easy actually to reprocess helium and remove various contaminants that have been picked up. The key really to a cost-effective recycle system is capturing the helium as it leaves the process or application. In the case of commercial processes that are now using helium, for example, manufacturing of fiber optic cables, there's a single point of exhaust from the manufacturing facility, and as I mentioned, it's relatively easy to capture that helium and get it into a recycle system. So as you're thinking about different applications for helium, perhaps you've identified some things that would involve very large volumes of helium that would be cost prohibitive if that helium were to be lost. Please consider the fact that there are commercially available recycle systems, as well as the fact that Praxair has the resources to design and tailor recycle systems for new applications, and that will effectively lower the cost of use of helium in that application. And now Eloise is going to provide some additional details on the contest itself.
Thanks so much, Dante. So I think we've already talked about the objectives of this contest being, the purpose of identifying potential new applications for helium. The structure of the contest is a phased one. So in the first phase, at least 5 of the most compelling, most interesting proposals will be advanced. And the submitters of those proposals will each have the opportunity to have a direct conversation with a Praxair group. And the purpose of the discussion is to allow Praxair to better understand the technology itself, what are some of the areas that present hurdles, what are some advantages, what's the business opportunity that's being afforded by this technology. After all of the conversations have been held, Praxair will review these additional pieces of information and will select at least 3 winners. Each winner will receive $30,000 US as a cash prize. And there are potential opportunities for these winners to have additional work with Praxair to develop technology.
Great, thank you, Eloise. I'd like to remind all of our attendees that you can submit your questions at any time using the Q&A chat box. We'll keep track of the questions that are submitted and try to answer all of them during the question and answer session coming up. Eloise, could you please give us some more information about
schedule, process, and criteria?
Yes,
we'd be delighted to. So this timeline is available at our website for this contest, so you can see it there. As you can see, the contest has been live for a while. We launched it back at the end of September, and we expect to close it out to new submissions just after the start of the new year. And as we already discussed, Praxair will go through the stage process of evaluating the proposals that come in and hope to eventually announce winners in June of 2016. So the specific process by which this goes through is, as I already discussed, a phased one. Right now we are in the open submission window. The deadline to submit is 5 p.m. January 14th. So you have until then to get your submissions in. At that point, Praxair will evaluate all of the proposals that have been submitted during February and March, and they will advance at least 5 of these groups to have direct conversations. They hope to make their final decisions and announce the winners of the $30,000 cash award in June of 2016. So we've talked about them advancing the most compelling, most interesting ones. Well, that's kind of a nebulous term. The criteria that they're going to be using to evaluate are twofold. Partly it's the technology itself, and partly it's the business opportunity that's being afforded. So, first off, of course, is what is the technology and how feasible is it? How unique is this approach? Is this something that really is going to open up a whole new avenue? And how does it take advantage of the unique properties of helium? Dante's already pointed out the trend that some of the most successful applications for helium right now take advantage of at least 2 of the characteristics of helium, whether it be inertness or, great thermal conductivity, low solubility, tell us how you're using helium. Of course, the strong business opportunity is also important. So are you breaking into a new sector? Are you using a lot, a little? Maybe it's a little for a high-end application. Maybe it's a lot and there's strong opportunity to recycle. So please tell us about these things in your submissions because they will count in terms of how Praxair evaluates.
Great. Thank you, Eloise. So why should solution providers be interested in this contest?
Well, I think there are, besides the cash award of $30,000, I think there are 2 main reasons that people should be interested. So one is if you're already active in this area, this is a great opportunity to present your technology to the key personnel within Praxair. And, if you are selected to move forward, this is an even better opportunity to talk directly and have a frank discussion about the advantages that your technology might offer. And of course, the additional carrot is the potential for actual funded development, depending on how your technology fits with Praxair.
Okay. It's now time for the frequently asked questions portion of today's webinar. These questions are often asked about NineSigma projects or have already been submitted to the Praxair forum or to NineSigma's provider help desk. I'm not sure if my approach is within scope for this challenge. How can I get assistance?
Sorry about that. I hit the wrong button. My bad. So this is actually a great question. I think that Jonathan has actually already kind of alluded to a number of the different ways in which you can get in touch with us. And many of the questions that have come in have discussed whether or not an approach is within scope. So you can email us. You can post your question at the forum. And we like this best because It gives you the opportunity to read some of the other discussions that are taking place at the forum. Plus, it gives everybody else in the community an opportunity to see your question and the answer that we post. So there are a lot of different ways in which you can get in touch with us to get more information about whether or not it's within scope or other types of process or technical questions.
Great, thank you, Eloise. We've probably covered this already, but what is the deadline for submitting a proposal?
Always happy to reinforce the deadline, which is 5 p.m. on January 14th or 16th? 14th. 14th. 2016.
Great, thank you, Eloise. Now, if I'm selected as a semifinalist, do I have to sign anything before the technology presentation to Praxair?
So this is a great question. For those of you who have not perused the official rules, I definitely would encourage you to if you're interested in participating in this contest. So the answer is no. As a semifinalist, the direct conversations that you might have with Praxair would still fall under the non-confidential regime. However, if you are selected to be one of the winners of the cash prizes, you will be required to sign an NDA with Praxair before you can accept the cash award. Great question.
Okay. And our next question. If I'm one of the winners, am I required to spend the $30,000 prize on technology development?
So the $30,000 prize is a cash award. It is not directed funding. So this means that you can spend the money, if you run a research lab, you can use it to, buy capital equipment, fund a graduate student. If you are an individual contributor, you can use this money to pay rent. This is a cash award and it is not directed funding.
All right. Thank you very much, Eloise. At this time, we'll open the session to any questions from the audience. Please continue to submit your questions using the Q&A chat box. We'll take the rest of our time to answer them live. If we don't get to your question, don't worry. Our Q&A session is being archived, and all questions and answers will be made available on the Praxair contest page. Our first question would most likely be addressed to the team from Praxair. Does this innovation contest include liquid helium and/or helium-free isotope? Michael?
No, I would say that we would limit this to helium-4, just the basic element. So I would say we probably would not pursue anything with helium-3.
But what about, so the other part of the question was liquid helium. So I think as long as it's helium-4, you guys are interested in uses for helium in any of its states, correct?
Yes, that's certainly true, whether it's gas or liquid helium.
Okay, super. Thanks very much. So I do want to emphasize, because I'm not sure that, I know that Jonathan emphasized that we are going to answer all the questions that come in live, but if we don't get to your question, the unanswered questions that we don't have time for, we will answer and post at the website at the forum. So just to kind of reemphasize that both the recording of this webinar as well as the written transcript as well as a list of unasked questions with answers provided will all be available as resources. These usually are available about 2 weeks after the webinar has occurred, and I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of that.
Thank you, Eloise, for that clarification. I'd also like to reiterate that if you have any questions after this webinar, you can submit the questions to the Praxair contest forum, which is a great resource for you. Additionally, we have an email address, phd@ninesigma.com. That's our provider help desk. We also have a phone number listed there. You can reach the provider help desk that way as well. That would be another great resource for you to get your questions submitted, and we will get it over to the Praxair team for an answer as quickly as possible. Our next question would probably be most directed over to Eloise. How is confidential material in a proposal handled? Can an NDA be put in place prior to the panel stage?
So let me address this more broadly. Confidentiality, IP rights, this is always, this is always a big concern. And for submitting at NineSigma to this innovation contest, if you look at the NineSigma's terms of use, in addition to the official rules for this contest, we try to make it as clear as possible that the confidential information is not going to be accepted. So if you submit stuff to us and that it's stamped confidential, we will get back to you and ask you to modify your proposal. More importantly, if it's not stamped confidential, that it was, by agreeing to the terms and conditions of the contest and of the NineSigma's platform, you are actually asserting that you are only supplying non-confidential information. So at this stage, everything that is submitted in a proposal should be non-confidential. We have a lot of coaching that's available. You're welcome to call or email us. Frequently people are frustrated about, well, how can I talk about what I want to propose without giving it away? And you know, let me just say right now that in general, what we want you to do is to tell us what is the endpoint that you're getting to. So you are able to affect some great results in agriculture using helium. So this is what you're doing. You don't necessarily have to tell us the nuts and bolts, but you do have to tell us what you're doing in the broad strokes of how you get there. Data, of course, is king. So if you have some data, even if it's redacted and it's preliminary, if you can show us data that it shows how the use of helium is providing an advantage or is achieving some sort of effect that can't otherwise be achieved, that definitely would help. And usually data itself is not confidential. So having the conversation with Praxair, if you are selected to advance, is only going to occur in a non-confidential environment. So, you know, we'll remind you if you are selected, but the NDAs only get put in place if you are selected as a winner. So hopefully that clarifies the IP and confidentiality issue.
Okay, thank you, Eloise. This one may be addressed more to the Praxair team, and possibly Eloise may have some comments as well. Would the amount of novel science that the helium can provide be a consideration, or is scale and marketability most important? Michael, Dante?
I think as you start off, I mean, I think that the marketability is the key driver, but we absolutely do not want to limit novel technology for if nothing else, a simple reason that there may be technology that is developed that might have an application aside from what is initially intended that could even better drive a market opportunity. So my thought is we certainly are open to any technological innovation that has a particular application and may have additional applications besides what is initially thought with the research. That would be my thought. Dante, do you have anything you would add there?
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike, and I'd just like to reinforce your comment there. I think we often see in other applications for industrial gases where you have made some fundamental advance, or there's something going on fundamentally that we're able to translate that and expand the market by translating it into adjacent spaces where the same fundamental mechanisms can be brought into play. So again, I would encourage, as Mike said, to bring those things with novel science forward, even if the commercial application appears to be small.
Great, thank you, Michael. Dante. For those of you who have already submitted a question, thank you very much. For those of you that haven't, I would strongly encourage you to ask your questions at this time. This is an excellent opportunity and resource for you to pose your questions directly to representatives from Praxair as well as the NineSigma side to get either your detailed questions about the project itself or about how to respond to this innovation contest answered very, very promptly. Now we'll proceed to our next question. This would be another one addressed to the Praxair team. Do you have a minimum goal for the amount of helium to be used in new applications? For example, your application must use X kilograms of helium per year.
No, and I would say this would go along somewhat with what we just discussed, where if there's any kind of ancillary or sideways application beyond the intended application, that definitely provides value, I think, to this innovation. And so as you're developing a particular application, I think the ability to transfer that elsewhere holds enough of value that we have not put a firm number down on, hey, it's got to use this much helium in order to be a justified market expense. I mean, there's obviously lots of other things that go into it too, right? What other capital cost is necessary? Is it easy to simply use a small amount of helium in an application and there's no other cost associated with it? From a market perspective, I think that can sway, right? If there's if there's nothing else in addition to that. Dante, do you have any thoughts on that?
Other than the historically with gas applications, we have seen, and this includes a variety of gases, not just helium. We have seen things start off very small and grow quickly, and they also grow through the adjacencies that we've been discussing. So I wouldn't. I think we purposely avoided putting a minimum number on that for that purpose.
So definitely, I think to just kind of augment Dante and Mike's comments, if you have an innovative approach for which you don't necessarily understand what the business opportunity is, but you think it's achieving something that really can't be done by any other means, this would speak to the innovation question that Mike answered earlier. I would definitely encourage you to respond, because obviously the Praxair team has more information at their fingertips to be able to understand what the business opportunity might be. Now, if you can speak to the marketability or the sector into which you might be able to enter, that, of course, is helpful, but I certainly wouldn't want anyone to be dissuaded from submitting a proposal just because they can't speak to the economic upside of a new technology. And Dante or Mike, if that's not, if I'm speaking incorrectly, please say something.
Well, Louise, I think that's right on. Thanks for the clarification on that.
Okay. Moving on to our next question. Bear with me, it's a lengthy question. We have already developed and are already demonstrating a prototype of a new product or product class on a Department of Energy grant, but we are still a couple of years away from commercialization and could potentially use Praxair support to help commercialize. Do we qualify for this challenge?
From my perspective, I would say yes. We are open to the possibility of being involved beyond just the cash prize. So, as you guys are developing your technology, as we can provide input and value, maybe from a point of view that you wouldn't have otherwise considered or possibly contacted. If it's a unique technology that really is able to use helium in a very accretive way, then that is something that we would be open to, and I would say that's well within the scope of this concept.
Thank you, Michael. Do you have anything you'd like to add there, Dante?
With one clarification, obviously it would have to be, kind of within the bounds of the DOE requirements. So we, I just speaking from Praxair's perspective, we would have interest, but it would also have to fit in with the DOE requirements and code that they have.
Yes, and let me add that we actively seek partnerships with various entities and organizations, whether it's a research group at a university or a national lab or a startup, and that is also encouraged by the Department of Energy. And in fact, the Department of Energy have terms and conditions in their grants which actually at the same time support these kinds of partnerships, also protect the original inventors of the technology. So I think we would be very excited about that kind of opportunity, whether it be a simple case where we would provide the channel to market, or whether there's an opportunity for us to be involved in an actual joint development program.
And so let me just add to that from the NineSigma perspective, which is that in terms of being eligible to participate in this innovation challenge, this innovation contest, you know, as long as it is not in conflict with your DOE grant, all parties who are not agents of or employees of Praxair are eligible to participate in this innovation contest. You know, winning a cash prize is great. What happens after that is kind of, I think that's really the root of the question that this person was asking, you know, and I think that Dante and Mike's answers are really geared towards, well, if you come across our table, what is our ability to interact with you? But in terms of your eligibility to participate in the contest, the only filter really is whether or not you are of majority age in the regime where the region where you reside, and whether or not you are you know, an employee or a contractor of Praxair. So hopefully that kind of clarifies the sort of distinction between the two separate questions that could be asking.
Great, thank you all for that multifaceted approach to that question. Would like to reiterate one more time, this is an excellent opportunity for our attendees to ask their questions directly to the Praxair team and the NineSigma side, so please take advantage of this opportunity. We have our next question. You mentioned the market and scalability are important, but also encourage novel science. Are we able to submit more than one proposal?
So from a process side, the answer is absolutely yes. And we have frequently had this where particularly creative research groups or individual contributors have multiple ideas that they want to propose. The only thing that we ask is that you submit each technology or each idea as an individual proposal. So it is not uncommon for us to have 2 or 3 proposal submissions from the same organization or same individual submitter. So the answer is definitely yes, but please help us help you by submitting each one as its own proposal.
Great, thank you.
So that's a great question. So we've had a lot of great conversation. You know, we seem to have hit a lull in terms of questions from our, you know, our community. We do have quite a few attendees that are online, and as Jonathan mentioned earlier, this really is a singular opportunity for you to be able to get an immediate response to any questions that you might have, and I would definitely encourage people to take advantage of this opportunity. You know, we are open for a few more minutes yet before we'll need to close out and talk about next steps and hand things back to Jonathan, our moderator. So I would definitely encourage you guys to type into the Q&A chat box there. You know, in the meantime, I'll just invite Dante or Mike to share any additional thoughts that they might have regarding the questions of scope, the questions of additional opportunities with Praxair, you know, just kind of a free-form conversation here. Dante, Mike?
I guess I would know. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Dante.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up comment on the discussion around the DOE, and for those folks who are under an existing DOE contract, you know, before proceeding, it would be prudent for them to discuss what they're thinking about with the individual in their organization who is responsible for administering that contract, and then have a follow-up discussion, if it's appropriate, with the DOE contracting officer, so that all the relevant requirements of their DOE contract are adhered to. I think one comment I'd like to make is I think this contest is reflective of Praxair's approach to sourcing new ideas from outside of Praxair. We are looking to establish complementary relationships with research groups, individuals, startup companies, other firms to advance new technologies. And this is a particular area of interest. Praxair is the largest producer of industrial gases in the Western Hemisphere and third largest in the world. And part of the way we sustain our growth is to develop new applications for the products that we make, which are our gases. So look forward to reading your proposals and interacting with many of you. Mike?
One thing I was going to note, and thanks, Dante, I think that's a very good summary. One thing I was going to note, and I think Jonathan and Eloise have touched on it, and certainly if you've done much navigating on the website, there is more background information beyond this presentation. We have a resource document that goes into a little bit more detail and answers some basic questions about helium. We have a couple other documents that are on the site. Obviously, if you're interested in more, we could talk for hours and hours about the different properties and existing applications of helium. There's a significant amount of publicly available information on what exists out there as well. If you want any more detail beyond just the very high level that we're going into on this presentation and then in the resource document, there's a lot of interesting stuff behind it. So I would encourage everybody certainly to look in more detail at that.
Thank you, Dante. Thank you, Michael. Our next two questions I'll address to Eloise from NineSigma. First, do you have a sense of how many proposals you'll be receiving?
So that's an interesting question, and I think that for those of you that have not yet had a chance to visit NineSites, ninesites.ninesigma.com is the platform where this innovation contest resides. You'll see that we run all types of projects. There are other contests in addition to this one, and it's hard to predict. If I had a crystal ball, I would use it for a lot of different things, but it's hard to predict exactly how many we'll be receiving for any given project that we run. A lot of it has to do with the time of year. At certain times of year, certain topics are more predominant, have to do with the topic itself. In general, some areas tend to have a lot more activity than others. But for this particular contest, I would say that I think Praxair would certainly be pleased if we were to get anything like 50 proposals. Now whether or not we achieve that, I don't know, but I think that's kind of a number that I'll just throw out there. Did you read the second question?
I did not yet.
Okay.
The second question is, how many times have you run this contest in the past?
So that's an odd question. The answer is 0. Because each of the contests that we run for each of our different clients, each contest is unique. All of our clients have different needs, they have different goals and objectives, and so I can say with complete honesty and transparency that every single contest that we run is unique, and so this has never been run before by NineSigma.
Great, thank you, Eloise. Our next question is, how much funding are you going to provide to develop the best proposal, and for how many proposals? I think we may have touched a little bit on this earlier in today's session.
Well, okay, so I'm going to answer this first off from a process question, and then I'm going to throw it over to Mike and Dante to answer from a sort of longer-term opportunity side. So from an immediate process side, the structure of this contest, as we had alluded to earlier, is a phased one. The ultimate winners will each win $30,000 as a cash prize. So that, from the standpoint of the contest, if you win at the very end, you will get $30,000 cash to do what you please with, plus you will have made the connection with the Praxair technical team. Now, should Praxair choose to pursue any of those technologies to which they've been, afforded a glimpse of, that would be up to Praxair for them to determine whether and how they might choose to pursue a further relationship. And so that's the part where I'll throw it over to Mike and Dante to talk about what that might look like.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to give kind of a nebulous answer on this, because the basic answer is it depends. Certainly for a technology that has a lot of promise, that looks like it has very good scalability, we'll be very interested in contributing significantly to it potentially. Obviously, it's got to be a scenario where it makes sense for both parties, and assuming that we can achieve a situation that does appear to be very beneficial for both entities, then we would pursue it. And so I can't give a low number, I can't give a high number on what would be acceptable. It would all depend on what the market scenario would show. But certainly there is significant interest, and again, on the high end, if it did make sense, then we're open to it. That makes sense. Dante, do you have anything that you would add to that?
No, exactly, Mike. And just to comment about how we set ideas for funding for any purpose. I mean, as Mike said, it's based on the market potential, but we also look at technology readiness, and so we're looking at a combination of what is the potential economic value that's being created, and then some of the risks associated with getting from whatever the technology readiness level is today to a commercial product. And in that process, there are both technical and commercial risks, and that's all part of the process. I think one thing people should be aware of is that although Mike and I both have technical backgrounds, our business is actually sponsoring the contest itself. So there's a very close connection between what we're doing today and how we'll vet the proposals that we receive, and the people who are involved with this particular business unit.
Thank you all. Our next question is another one for Eloise. Is there a specific format that the proposal must be in?
So if you are interested in responding to this contest and you visit our website, the only way that you can respond is to click on the Respond Now button at the contest homepage. It's a blue button, and it's close to the top of the page. You'll see when you click on that, and to click on that and see it, you'll actually need to be registered and signed into your account. Once you've arrived there, you'll see that this is an online response form. So you can type into the field, or you can cut and paste from a document that you have already put together. So the format is basically, we try to provide you guidance in terms of the types of information that we want. We can't force you to provide that, and sometimes you won't actually have all of the pieces of information, so please just do the best you can. But understand that the guidance that we give you is to prompt you to provide the types of information that Praxair is looking to use in order to have an apples-to-apples comparison as they look at the different proposals that are submitted. So many of the people who participate will review what the online response form looks like, and then they'll go and write up a separate Word document as a proposal and then just cut and paste into the different fields. So, again, you may not have supporting information, or you may not be able to project what the business opportunity is. And in those cases, you just do the best you can and explain based on the information that you do have at hand. Once you're done, you can click Submit, or if you aren't able to complete the submission process in one sitting, you can click on Save as Draft, which will then allow you to come back at a later time to complete the information that you've already submitted, and then you would click Submit at the end. So if you need help with the process, NineSigma has a provider help desk, and we are always ready to provide assistance for the submission process.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eloise. Our next question would be directed to the Praxair team. Can you comment on Heliox, medical gas for breathing assistance? Is that a good application for Praxair? Would improvements to Heliox be of interest?
Might have to send this one over towards Dante. Dante, can you answer that in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, Heliox is an important medical application of helium. So Heliox, for those who are unaware, is a mixture of helium and oxygen as a respiratory therapy. It's actually closely related to the use of helium as a diving gas, and then sometimes it's combined with the introduction of other therapies via breathing. It's an important medical application. Improvements to that are most welcome, and we look forward to hearing about them.
Great. Thank you, Dante. We have just a few more minutes in today's webinar. As I have said in the past, this is an excellent opportunity for you to pose your questions directly to the Praxair team or to the NineSigma team represented by Eloise Young. I suggest that you avail yourself of this opportunity to pose your questions directly to the team and get a prompt and an immediate answer. I'm going to go ahead and start to wrap up today's webinar. I will keep the webinar open for just a few more minutes longer to get any last-minute questions that we might have coming in. But what you can do today, first off, you can visit that website, ninesites.ninesigma.com/web/helium-contest. That will take you directly to the Praxair page. Additionally, you can also find this particular innovation contest by just going directly to ninesites.ninesigma.com and clicking on Innovation Contests. While you're at NineSites, you can also stay connected to the forum by subscribing to it. Again, you will need to be registered with NineSites in order to do that. Lastly, we'd like to remind you that the submission deadline is January 14th, 2016 at 5 p.m. Eastern Time.
And, Jonathan, I just want to sort of comment about the subscribing to the contest forum. If this is something that's interesting to you, and if you're listening to this webinar, then it probably is of interest to you, I really do encourage you to subscribe to the contest forum. Subscribing will allow the system to email you an alert whenever there's new content that's posted at the forum. And this is certainly a great way to stay abreast of new information that I might post, such as webinar resources in a couple of weeks, or to see what are the questions that others in the community are asking and how the Praxair team responds to them. So I definitely encourage people to subscribe to the contest forum.
Thank you. Thank you, Eloise. We actually have time for one last question that has just come in. In the proposal format, you require similar information in different sections. Can you please explain, for example, what do you mean by technical feasibility in one section and then feasibility data in another section?
So, basically we've broken this out to talk about in the different sections, technical feasibility. I think everybody understands that. How is this going to work? What is the likelihood that this can be a successful technology? The data is really the supporting data. So if you have feasibility data that shows proof of concept and you can share it with us, well, that would make your case that much stronger. Now, for a conceptual approach, obviously you might not have feasibility data, but you can certainly discuss the scientific rationale that supports why the idea is technically feasible. And that's sort of just the approach. You know, another idea, another thing that people frequently struggle with is the difference between team expertise and team experience. So experience really speaks to, you know, the members of your team. Maybe you have somebody on your team who has 10 years of experience working with industrial gases. Expertise more has to do with the fact that maybe you are by training a mechanical engineer, and your area of expertise allows you to provide some credibility to the approach that you are providing. So one has to do with your training, one has to do with sort of the experiences that you have running specific projects or you know, because of the work that you do. So that would be just another distinction to make.
Great, thank you, Eloise. And I'd like to remind all of our attendees, if you have a question that comes to mind after today's webinar, please avail yourself of the Provider Help Desk. The contact information can be found on the Praxair contest page on 9sites. And I will go ahead and conclude today's webinar. I suggest you visit the challenge page for more information about how to stay connected and to respond and participate in this contest. Please note that the deadline for submissions is January 14th, 2016 at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. One last reminder that today's webinar was recorded and will be made available along with a transcript of today's webinar on the 9sites page, along with the Q&A transcript of the questions asked during today's webinar. Thank you all for attending, and thank you to all of our panelists from NineSigma and from Praxair for their time and expertise. We appreciate your time and look forward to receiving your submissions. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.